Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to thank Mike and Brett for being here. This is a really special time, a really special moment to reflect on 10 years of Jack Layton's passing. And Mike was just sharing with me something that happens to me all the time as well while we were walking over, that every so often someone will come up with another story, a personal story about how Jack has touched their lives, how he's inspired them. And Mike still gets those stories to this day. I still get them. As leader of the movement that Jack was such a big part of, I continually get people who say, you know what, I'm in this movement because of Jack. He inspired me. He made me believe that better is possible. He made me believe that we can actually make Canada a better place. He gave me hope. I saw him as a happy warrior. I saw him as someone who gave his whole heart because he believed in people. He believed in fighting for them. And I continue to be inspired by those moments that happen to me so often. And I think about that legacy. And I think about my own experience with Jack, how he was someone that when I was contemplating getting into politics, I had a very cynical view of it. I didn't really believe that you can make a difference. I didn't really believe that politicians can make a difference. And my friends pointed to Jack and said, well, what about Jack? Don't you think he's someone that makes a difference? And I got to be honest, I was pretty cynical, but Jack was able to overcome the cynic in me. And I said, yeah, he is someone that I could look up to, someone that I believe in, someone that I know cares about people and fights for people. And I am honored. I wrote on the wall that we were going to carry the torch for you. Actually, Group didn't help me with the end of that because I don't think it made sense until she added the end part. But we are going to carry the torch for you. So we are going to keep on fighting for that vision that Jack had of a better Canada, of a better world. And we're going to do it with love in our hearts, with optimism, with courage. And it's a tough fight if you want to build a better world, to take on some of the challenges that we want to take on the ultra-rich who continue to make massive profits and don't pay their fair share. It seems like this massive challenge to take on the climate crisis we're up against. But we can do it. And we can do it if we care for one another, if we love one another, and if we follow in that Jack Layton legacy, in the footsteps of Jack, who really believed that we could do better. And so I'm honored to spend some time today to reflect on 10 years of Jack's passing and the legacy that he's left behind, the people that he's inspired. And I'm so thankful that we could all be here together for that. Donc, ce que je veux dire aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment un moment spécial. Je veux remercier Mike et Brett pour être ici avec nous. On a écrit quelque chose sur le mur et pour moi, j'ai dit qu'on va continuer le travail que Jack a fait. Parce que chaque journée, il y a quelqu'un qui mentionne une histoire de Jack, comment Jack a inspiré les gens. Et pour moi, c'est vraiment inspirant. Pour moi, c'est vraiment motivant pour moi parce que c'est exactement ça qu'on veut faire. On veut bâtir un meilleur monde. Et Jack a vraiment inspiré cette idée que c'est possible, mieux est possible. On peut faire face aux grands défis si on prend soin les uns des autres. Donc, il a fait aussi un travail acharné au Québec. Et ce qu'il a laissé comme histoire ou laissé comme contribution pour notre mouvement, c'est vraiment ça, qu'on peut parler aux gens à travers le pays et montrer qu'on peut bâtir une meilleure société ensemble si on prend soin les uns des autres. C'est possible. Et cette rêve de Jack, c'est un rêve que je veux continuer. Je suis tellement honoré d'être quelqu'un qui peut continuer le travail de Jack Layton. Je suis tellement honoré que Mike et Brett sont ici avec nous. Et c'est exactement mon engagement, qu'on va continuer ensemble, on veut bâtir une meilleure société et on peut le faire si on prend soin les uns des autres. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, we will go with Olivia Stefanovich from CBC News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. With all due respect to Jack Layton, some people may see this announcement today to try to rename the riding of the Danforth to Danforth-Layton as an attempt to sway or influence voters in this particular riding towards the NDP. How do you respond to that?
Well, there is a tradition across Canada where ridings have been named in honor of previous members of parliament who contributed a lot, previous premiers. And this is in that same tradition here in Toronto. People know the legacy of Jack Layton, how he touched the lives of so many people, how he fought so hard to make people's lives better. And it seems very fitting to push for a renaming of the riding that he represented in honor of everything that he's done. And so it's something that I'm going to continue to push for. I think it's a powerful way to remember the legacy, and it's something that I think is important to do.
Regarding the situation in Afghanistan, should Canada's military go outside the wire in Kabul to transport Afghans from safe houses to the airport?
What's going on in Afghanistan, of course, is incredibly heartbreaking, and people have been seeing those images. And as I reflect more and more on this, I'm thinking about what Canada can do and what Canada should have done. I've been thinking about the fact that, maybe the fact that Justin Trudeau called an election might have impacted his ability to plan for the release or the evacuation of our allies in Afghanistan, and I'm worried about that. I'm thinking that maybe more could have been done. But right now, what Canadians want to see happen and what I want to see happen, anyone that put their lives on the line to help our forces, anyone that worked to support our troops, has to be evacuated. We have to do whatever we can to secure their safety. These are people that we promised we would have their back, and we can't go back on our word. These are people that put their lives and their families' lives at risk. And we are seeing really horrific images coming out of Afghanistan. There was an initial report that maybe the Taliban would not be as brutal. That does not seem to be the case at all. We are seeing that same brutality, and we've got to do everything to keep our word, to make sure that our allies, those translators, those that worked with our forces, are brought to safety. And we need to work with international partners, countries around the world, to make sure we're doing everything to help people evacuate from this humanitarian crisis.
En français, s'il te plaît.
J'ai réfléchi sur cette question. J'ai pensé, est-ce qu'on aurait pu faire mieux pour aider les gens en Afghanistan? Et ça me rend triste de penser de ça, mais peut-être Justin Trudeau était occupé avec faire déclencher une élection au lieu de faire tout ce qui est possible pour aider les gens en Afghanistan. Et ça me rend triste. Aussi, je veux dire clairement, on a des alliés en Afghanistan, les gens qui ont aidé nos forces canadiennes, qui ont mis leur vie en péril, et on doit les aider. On s'est engagé de s'assurer que ces gens vont être sécuritaires. C'est notre obligation de s'assurer qu'on en aide ces gens de quitter le pays, parce que les talibans a encore montré leur brutalité et comment c'est vraiment un danger pour les gens en Afghanistan à ce moment.
Next question, we have Annie Bertrand-Oliver from CTV News.
Hi, Mr. Singh.
Hey there.
Jack Layton was able to increase NDP support in almost every election he was in as the leader. He also was responsible for the Orange Wave getting 103 seats. You currently only have 24 seats. What do you think that your chances are of being able to pull off something similar and reach that opposition level, or potentially even becoming Prime Minister?
What Jack Layton showed us is that more New Democrats mean better help for people. That's really what it's about. For New Democrats, at the end of the day, we seek to be in a position to make a difference for people's lives. And so we've seen that in this pandemic. We've built on that tradition of New Democrats fighting for people. When people were struggling, we were there for them. When people needed more help, we were able to deliver that. We saved millions of jobs. We kept people safe. We made sure people had enough money to put food on the table and to pay their bills. We were able to do that because that's what New Democrats do. And so in this election, I'll put it to Canadians. If you want someone in your corner, someone who's going to fight for you, New Democrats will be there. And the big question I think that's in this election is who's going to pay the price of this pandemic and the cost of the recovery. We can leave it to Justin Trudeau, who's going to put the burden back on people, or cut the help you need and let the ultra-rich continue to have a free ride. Or you can choose New Democrats, who are going to make the super-rich pay their fair share so we can invest that into people and the help that they need.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Effectivement, ce que Jack Layton a montré, c'est la tradition des néo-démocrates de se battre pour les gens. C'est exactement ce qu'on fait et ce qu'on a fait pendant toute notre histoire et ce qu'on a eu la chance de faire pendant cette pandémie. Quand les gens ont eu besoin d'aide, c'était nous, les néo-démocrates, qui ont livré cette aide pour les gens. Et on a réussi à obtenir des victoires pour augmenter la PSU, pour augmenter la subvention salariale. Et en faisant tout ça, on a sauvé des millions d'emplois, on a aidé des millions de Canadiens et Canadiennes. Donc c'est exactement ce qu'on va continuer de faire. On sait qu'avec plus de néo-démocrates, vous avez plus d'aide dans votre vie. Et la grande question dans cette élection, qui va payer la facture pour la relance et pour la pandémie? Si on laisse Justin Trudeau de continuer, il va continuer de laisser les grandes entreprises, les ultra riches exploiter le système, ou vous pouvez choisir les néo-démocrates qui vont s'assurer que les ultra riches payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens.
And my follow-up is about, I'm hoping that I can get you to reflect. You're finishing up your first week of the campaign. I'm wondering what you can tell me you've done differently than in 2019 when the party was really hopeful it would gain more seats, you lost seats. What did you learn from that experience? What are you doing differently? And I'm hoping you can reflect on how this last week has been.
I think this last week has been a really powerful week. We were able to show Canadians what we believe is the choice in this election. We've shown Canadians really clearly you've got a choice between Justin Trudeau, who's let the ultra-rich have a free ride. We've shown how that's been the case, that companies like Amazon make record profits and don't pay their fair share, that rich investors are allowed to exploit the housing market and are driving up the cost of housing. Canadians who want to find a home are competing with companies that want to buy $1 billion of real estate in Canada. And we know that Justin Trudeau's let the super rich continue to make lots of money and have a free ride. New Democrats are committed to making sure the super rich pay their fair share, and we invest that into people. And that's what this election is about, and we've been able to show that to Canadians. I think we've also shown our commitment to fight for justice for Indigenous people. And going to Cowicess First Nations was a really powerful opportunity to remind Canadians that the trauma of residential schools is still here, that these are residential institutions that were designed to kill Indigenous kids, that genocide is a legacy that we've got to deal with, that we've got to confront. We can't look away, and we have to fight for justice by implementing the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, by making sure every kid is brought home. And I think what we can do differently in this election is we're going to show Canadians that when you needed help, New Democrats were there for you. And we're going to need that same focus in the recovery. And we put it to Canadians that you've seen the work that we've done. You saw that we fought for you. We saw that we helped people out when they needed it. And we're going to do that same thing in the recovery. And you've got a choice between Justin Trudeau, who's let the super rich have a free ride and not focused on you unless we force them to, or you can choose New Democrats who will have your back, who will fight for you, who will be on your side.
Next question, Mike Lucatar, Global News.
Mr. Singh, in response to one of my colleagues, you just brought up the possibility that calling an election may have affected Mr. Trudeau's ability to respond to the crisis in Afghanistan. What proof do you have of that, or are you just kind of spitballing here? Because I'm just trying to figure out why you even bring that up as an idea.
Well, I was thinking about the lack of response, the lack of making sure the allies that helped our forces were evacuated in a timely manner, and more evidence is being brought forward that suggests that there was a complicated process for people that were facing imminent danger of a potential resurgence of the Taliban. And given that real imminent danger, Canada's response seems to have been quite delayed, quite slow, and we still have many allies that have been left behind. And so in looking at that, the thought that's come to mind, did Justin Trudeau spend more time on focusing on an election rather than focusing on this humanitarian crisis? I think it's a legitimate question. And I'm worried about that because we're seeing the really horrible scenario unfold in Afghanistan, and my heart breaks for the people.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Ce qu'on a vu en Afghanistan, c'est tellement triste, c'est horrible les images qui sortent. Et quand j'ai pensé sur cette question, est-ce qu'on fait tout ce qui est possible, j'ai pensé peut-être que Justin Trudeau a mis trop de temps pour planifier une élection au lieu de mettre les ressources et le temps pour planifier l'évacuation de nos alliés en Afghanistan. Et ça me rend triste et c'est quelque chose de mauvais, mais je soulève cette question parce que la réponse du Canada était trop tard et le processus pour aider les gens était trop compliqué. Et à ce moment, on a manqué plusieurs de nos alliés qui sont toujours en Afghanistan en péril.
Just as a follow-up, you had mentioned a couple days ago that the Liberals, now talking about sick leave and promising sick leave was basically opportunistic. You could have called for this change to the name of the riding before the campaign, but you're doing it during the campaign. What do you say to people that you're being politically opportunistic by trying to use the Layton name to help you during this campaign?
Today we're remembering 10 years of Jack Layton. This is the 10-year anniversary, a pretty special and important time to remember someone a decade after his passing. And so when reflecting on that, 10 years later, on that day, to say, there's something we should do that's special for Jack Layton, to be able to talk about that, I think it's appropriate and an important time. 10 years later, when we look at special events, we commemorate the 10 years of someone's passing or the 10 years of an event. And so in this case, I think I wanted to contribute something to remember Jack, to remember his legacy, to remember what he's done. And it's not without precedent. We've seen this for other notable members of parliament or notable political leaders that ridings have been named in their honor. And I think it would be an important thing to do, a very symbolic and powerful thing to do to recognize all of Jack Layton's contributions.
Monsieur Singh, vous parlez de l'héritage de Jack Layton au Québec. Hier, Yves-François Blanchet a lancé des flèches à vous, au NPD, en disant qu'il y avait régulièrement des allusions peu subtiles sur le fait que les Québécois étaient racistes. Beaucoup n'ont pas aimé que vous ne condamniez pas votre député Matthew Green, qui a appuyé le professeur de l'Université d'Ottawa, qui a comparé le Québec à l'Alabama du Nord. Alors, vous répondez quoi à M. Blanchette là-dessus?
Je réponds clairement, c'est complètement faux. C'est complètement faux. Il n'y a aucune vérité dans ces propos. C'est complètement faux. Tous les néo-démocrates savent clairement que le racisme systémique existe à travers le pays. Ce n'est pas un enjeu d'un territoire, une province. C'est clairement un enjeu qui touche tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes, en particulier la communauté autochtone, qui n'ont pas toujours accès à l'eau potable. C'est le clé exemple de racisme systémique, quelque chose qui est normal dans toutes les vies, dans la vie de la plupart des Canadiens et Canadiennes. Accès à l'eau potable, c'est toujours un défi pour la communauté autochtone. C'est un exemple fort de racisme systémique et c'est un exemple qui existe à travers le pays. Donc, c'est faux. Et tous les démocrates savent que le racisme systémique n'est pas un enjeu d'une province ou d'un territoire. Et comme vous savez, moi, j'ai montré à plusieurs reprises comment j'adore la langue française, que mon travail pour apprendre la langue française, c'était un travail d'amour. J'ai des belles souvenirs du Québec et j'adore tout le temps que j'ai pour assister les événements au Québec, pour être là. Et Jack Layton a montré que si on ose ensemble, on peut bâtir une meilleure société. On doit le faire vraiment ensemble avec toutes les provinces et tous les territoires ensemble. Et c'est notre vision.
Et quel bilan? On est déjà à la fin de la première campagne. Quel bilan vous faites de votre début de campagne?
Notre campagne, je pense, était tellement fort pour montrer le choix dans cette élection. Un choix entre Justin Trudeau, qui laisse les ultra-riches d'exploiter le système, et les néo-démocrates, qui vont s'assurer que les ultra-riches payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens, pour faire face à la crise climatique, pour investir, pour régler la crise du logement, pour la justice pour la communauté autochtone. Donc, je suis fier du travail qu'on a fait, mais plutôt, j'ai beaucoup d'espoir pour l'avenir. On sait on a des grands défis, mais si on ose ensemble, on peut bâtir une meilleure société.
Next question, Denise Paglinawan, Canadian Press.
Hi, what do you think was the secret behind Layton's success in Quebec, and were there lessons there where you failed to heed last time?
I think Jack did an incredible job over the course of his leadership. He had a vision and a dream of making sure that everybody across Canada knew they could elect a new Democrat. And when it hadn't really been done in Quebec, he believed that he could show the people of Quebec that, yes, you can get a new Democrat who's going to fight for you and your family, who's going to make sure the federal government delivers the help that you need. And he was able to do that over the course of a number of elections. And that's exactly the same type of work that we want to do. We want to show people, if you vote New Democrat, you get someone on your side, you get someone who's going to fight for you. And in this election, it answers the big question. The choice between Justin Trudeau, who's let the ultra-rich have a free ride, or New Democrats are going to make them pay their fair share so we invest in people. And I want to show that that's a choice that all Canadians can make. That's a choice that the people of Quebec can make. And I'm proud to be able to offer that opportunity to people.
And regarding Afghanistan, what would you have done differently from what Trudeau has done?
After reflecting on it, I think we would have first we would have sped up the evacuation, knowing that there is an imminent pullout of the United States that had been being signaled for some time now. We should have made sure we evacuated all of our allies and their families. We need to make sure that the process was simple. The request or the process that Justin Trudeau had put in place required people filling out an online form, and it was complicated, it was bureaucratic, and we've got an imminent humanitarian crisis. That is not the way to respond. A lot of people didn't have access to the internet, didn't have access to the tools to be able to fill out those applications. It should have been quicker, it should have been streamlined, and it should have been focused on getting people out as quick as possible. Now that we're in this crisis, we've got to still do everything we can to make sure our allies, those that put their lives and their families' lives at risk to help our forces, are evacuated and brought to safety.
Thank you, merci. That concludes our press conference.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Merci. Thank you.